Thank you for subscribing to our channel and for also telling your friends about us. Since this is Anna part 2, I need to give you kind of a background of Anna part 1 in case you did not watch it. Anna was part of a literally divided household. As you can see on the screen, Elkanah preferred Hannah, but Peninnah was the one who gave him children. You could imagine the tense, you can imagine the friction that that family may have gone through. And even though Anna is smiling on this picture because she has the attention of her husband, most of the time she had to do with the bullying of the other woman, the sound of the children running in the house, and the bitter sting of bareness. In Hannah's time, a family relied on the offspring for many things, to carry their name, to do the work, heritage, you name it. Being bareness carry a heavy social burden, a burden that not only Hannah had to do, Rachel, and even Elizabeth. In this tour, we're going to talk about Hannah part 2. What helped her deal with this uncomfortable situation? And it was her faith. It was her trust in Jehovah. Imagine walking 20 miles 3 times a year, 20 miles from where she lived all the way to the temple. And on each visit, asking Jehovah. And she is the first one that uses the word Jehovah of armies. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry at Jehovah. She was just looking for a way out of her situation. In one occasion, the situation got so bad that the priest confused her pain and her situation from being drunk. Imagine having to deal with the burness factor and now being accused of being drunk. But she wasn't disrespectful. She actually, with grace, explained the misunderstanding. Anna's refusal of a man's imperfection get in the way of her pure worship. And Jehovah rewarded her for that. The priest was so convinced of her reaction that he said to her, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant your petition." Those 20 miles now are not as long as they were before. Now she can eat, probably she can sleep, and probably the bullying is no longer a problem as it was before. Jehovah, the listener of prayer, the God who had not assigned prayer to anybody else, responded to Anna's prayer. But remember, Anna gave, Hannah gave a vow. Her vow was if she get a son, she was gonna take him to the tabernacle. So she stayed at home to nurse Samuel until Samuel was big enough to start eating solid food. In those 20 miles again, the same 20 miles that she had done before had a different meaning. May I get a reader for the text that is appearing on the screen and is titled A Promise Kept? Who can help me with the reading? Sister Jackson.
A promise kept.
Jonathan. Sorry.
Hannah and Elkanah brought Samuel to Shiloh with gratitude along with offerings. She presented her son to Eli, fulfilling her vow.
You may have remember, or you may not remember that woman that was crying, but what a relevant, important moment in Anna's life. The Bible does not tell us if she was able to have more children, but we could imagine after this, she has her sight on asking Jehovah for help. And Hannah is just one of those examples that are worth reading as a personal study because the way she gave praise to Jehovah, the way she relied on him, it was only imitated by Mary. Let me read that portion to you. You see, Mary quoted several parts of Hannah's prayer. Mary was an avid reader of the Bible. That's why she was able to have the reaction that she did, just like Hannah, again, receiving the assignment that her baby was going to do something greater for humanity. Let me see if I can show you that now. Let me make this on still. Well, you can do that. Something is happening to the letters. They're not coming legible. But that is something uh, for you guys to do as a personal study. Look at Hannah as an example. Think about that sleeveless coat that she did. Sister David, do you have a comment?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I put
Oh,
my
okay.
hand down. Sorry.
Oh no, no. I thought you wanted to say something as I was talking. Maybe you're raising your hand just to be ready for the next reading. So the Bible doesn't give an age as to exactly when they took him to the temple, but we could imagine or understand that it may have been when he could eat solid food and he doesn't depend on the mother's milk. 20 miles, 20 miles on food, and this wasn't a straight 20 miles. You have to go through mountains and valley, but you can see the dedication and how much Hannah loved Jehovah. Just an example, friends, for us to keep in mind as we are going through our own things, our own crisis. We need to rely or copy Hannah the way she did. Remember, when people are going through bad things, they think they have been forgotten by Jehovah. But that was not the case for Hannah. She looked at it a different way. And I'm reading my notes here, bearing three more sons and two daughters. Jehovah blessed them greatly for that faithfulness. Okay, so that was part one. Before we talked about Samuel, we need to talk about this Last Supper picture, which is very inaccurate. The painting that we know as the Last Supper, it is known as an Italian banquet. That's what was done in Europe, not what was done in Israel. And they interpret the Bible the best way that they can. So if you get an opportunity, do not criticize the Last Supper directly, but invite your Bible students or your family members to think if this is accurate and why we should focus on accuracy. instead of things that are popular. The reality is the Galileans were a working class and they will not sit at a banquet. So we are stripping away 500 years of Renaissance paint to reconstruct the true historical menu of Jesus and his apostles. So, what is wrong with the Last Supper? First, there were not chairs. People actually recline on the floor. And you're going to see that in the organization's publications. Reclining on the left side so that your right hand may be free. What are you going to do with your right hand? Well, there were no forks or knives or spoon. You're going to use your right hand to actually collect the food and bring it to your mouth. The fluffy white bread, as we see today, it was only for the rich. For a typical Jewish family, when Jesus come from, their bread were dark, they were flat, and they were dense, and primarily they were round, and they were torn by hand. Today, we drink wine out of a bottle, but back then, wine needed to be diluted with water. It was better than drinking water per se. Most people during the week they will eat plant-based food, and those who could afford fish, they could eat fish. But the majority of people ate lentil and similar items. And if you see the map, those closer to Galilee, the north, they could have fish because they have the lake, or as they call it back then, the Galilean Sea. But in the south, Judean, they will have drier, rockier terrain and different food. So this helps us get an idea of the type of food Jesus may have eaten, what a carpenter family may have eaten, the fishermen's, the labor, the working class. This is more accurate and it agrees with what the Bible says. So, believe it or not, 70 to 80% of the meal have to do with bread or with grain. 15% of that included olive oil, either for dipping, for cooking, for medicine, or even as lamp fuel. It was the fuel for almost everything. You also have diluted wine, as you see there on the screen. But let's go back to the tour. Let's go back to the tour. Samuel goes to the temple in the most horrendous time in Israel history. Why? Israel leadership is faltering. The people serving at the temple were not honest, and they are the sons of the priests. Imagine that. But before we go into the nitty gritty, let's talk about the tent of the meeting or the tabernacle. Can anybody help me read the three characteristics that we can learn from the tabernacle? And Sister Davis, you're going to read one. Sister Moore, you're going to read another one. And Judy from Australia, you're going to read the third one.
The tent of meeting was first the dwelling, a, a mobile sanctuary where the presence of Jehovah dwelt.
Thank you. Sister Moore?
Samuel's boundaries as a non priestly qualified Levite, Samuel was strictly forbidden from seeing the Ark of the Covenant.
That makes sense. Thank you, Sister Moore. And Judy from Australia.
His station. He slept in the tabernacle courtyard, tasked with opening the heavy wooden doors of Jehovah's house every morning.
Every morning. That was his task. Thank you all for that fantastic reading. So, with that in mind, what you may be asking yourself, because that's the question I asked myself, What's the difference between the temple and the tabernacle? What's the difference? And I'm showing there at least five differences. Would you please just mention one? Sister Johnson, please mention one.
Well, one was the architecture
Okay.
with the temple. It was majestic and hewn stone and cedar.
Mhm. That's the second difference. There is the first one is right on the top. Melissa or Sheldon.
I, yes, it went sort of blurry.
So
Are
did
you
mine.
talking? Okay. So the top of the tabernacle Shiloh or under the Jewish temple, which one? Because it went blurry a little bit.
Oh, maybe it's your internet, but you answer the question correctly. The main difference of the two is that one was located in Silo and the other one was located in Jerusalem. Well done,
Okay.
Melissa. Let's ask Cheryl, what is the third difference between the tabernacle and the temple?
In the tabernacle, it was the mobility. It was
Hmm.
built for a journey in wilderness, and in Jerusalem, it was a permanent fixture for an established kingdom.
There you go. It may look simple to us, but to them, this was a
Yeah,
big
thank you.
deal. This makes this was completely new. They got used to the mobility, and now they have a permanent fixture. That must have been something interesting. And Sister Anita Wells, what's the one, two, three, fourth difference? Oh, Anita, I forgot to open your mic. Okay, now.
The metals that were used.
Mhm.
In Shiloh, they had primarily bronze and silver, and in Jerusalem, the metals were primarily solid gold.
Yes,
I thought that
that
was
is
interesting.
that was interesting, right? That's a big difference. And Gloria, what's the last one?
And the tabernacle Shiloh, the era, the chaotic period of the judges, and then the temple, which was in Jerusalem, the golden era of the kings.
Yeah. So now, friends, um, now you see the difference between the two. In another tour, I'm going to talk about uh, in more details what does that represent, why did Jehovah change this, and how we can learn from that. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you guys understand the difference between this sacred space. So let's go back to Samuel. What does the Bible tells us about him? What was his age? Where were he from? What was his clothing? Sister Hobbs.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Well, Samuel was brought to Shiloh. He was roughly 3 years old by his mother Hannah. Do you want me to continue?
Yes.
Okay. Um, he was a lifelong Nazarite, dedicated to sacred service before his conception. He was dressed in a linen ephod, receiving a new sleeveless coat from his mom every year. He grew up more likable, both from Jehovah's standpoint and from that of men.
Yeah. And Samuel is truly, thank you, Sister Hobbs. Samuel is truly remarkable because he really had some bad examples that could have influenced him in a negative way, but he chose not to. What was the problem? The children of the high priest. They have corrupt the sanctuary. His son, Opni and Phinehas, defile pure worship by committing immorality with females, tabernacle servants, bullying humble worshipers and doing all horrible things, and their dad completely ignore the situation. But what would Jehovah do? Late at night, resting in the courtyard, Samuel hears his name, Samuel, Samuel. Since his primary job was to take care of Eli, he assumed it is the old blind high priest calling him. So he goes to the side 3 times, but he's turned away. Can you imagine what that may have felt like? Can anybody help me read the heavy burden of prophecy? Yolanda from Brooklyn. Yolanda, your mic should be open.
Realizing Jehovah is calling the boy, Eli instructs him on how to answer. On the fourth call, Samuel replies, "Speak, for your servant is listening." He is immediately given a crushing mandate: deliver a message of total judgment against Eli's corrupt house.
Friends, I don't know what Samuel's face may have looked like. I described the situation to the artificial intelligence, and this is the this is the picture that it created, and I think it's pretty accurate. His face. How is he going to deliver this message to the person that he has been assigned to take care of, to respect? But was he obedient? Let's see. Can anybody help me read Hiding Nothing? Patty?
At dawn, Samuel performs his usual duty, opening the courtyard doors. Terrified to share the vision, he is called over by Eli, who asks him not to hide God's words. Despite his youth and fear, Samuel tells the high priest everything.
That was beautiful. He must have felt relief that Eli asked him to do this. Friends, we can spend more time talking about Samuel, the great things that he did, how he anointed David, and other great things that he did in his sacred service to Jehovah. Definitely someone that you want to add to your personal study to dig in deeper and see what else can we learn from Samuel. And Samuel was just a shadow of things to come. Our Lord and King Jesus Christ uh, was the ultimate prophet to walk here on the earth. Um, he spoke what Jehovah asked him to do. He listens, and he's the ultimate high priest who came entirely to do his Father's will. Something to meditate in this special week. As we're talking during this week, we want to get as close as possible to life in the time of Jesus so that we can understand the context. But most of all, we want to understand the culture. The culture will tell us a great deal about how people think and what people may have done or the way people reacted. Today's text talks about how their hearts continue dull in understanding. And he talks about how the apostles failed to connect the miracle of the bread that Jesus distributed that day. Which type of bread was it? Was it a barley bread or was it a wheat bread? Have you read or researched anything about this? Raise your hands and give me your comments. Uh, Shirley uh, Waters.
Yes, I did read that the barley was mostly used by the working class. It was readily available.
Yes, yes, indeed. And we can confirm that with the Bible and with archaeology. So when Jesus fed the 5,000, as it appears in the book of John, chapter 6, the verse specifically mentioned barley loaves. So if you're like me, who lacks imagination, I need to actually see a picture. I need to actually see something to better remember what the Bible was talking about. The Bible contains every detail of what exactly that crowd ate that day. So, just as a summary, can somebody tell me the difference between barley bread and wheat bread very quickly, just as a way of remembering? Denise?
Yes, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, the wheat bread was finer, lighter, and whiter, more expensive, and it was reserved for the wealthy. The barley was dark, dense, and heavy. It cost less, and it was food for the poor, and it was blessed and broken for the poor.
Yeah. Now you know when you read about the miracle, when you read about the Last Supper, now you could imagine what type of bread was Jesus eating. And this is very important because when you know how he was baked, how he was broken, you can actually see intimacy, or you can actually understand I wet bread with that person, or you went intimate with that person. Why? Because it is here where everybody will put the bread. So eating was not only to satisfy a physical need, but it was a way to forge intimacy and identity. Eating was a great opportunity to associate as a family. So when Jesus had the Last Supper with his apostles, you can now understand that that dinner was very special because he treated them as family. The rule of the bowl, it says you only dip your hand in the dish with family or with those you trusted deeply. Once we understand the culture, now we understand the context. And once we understand the context, we can meditate on that. Let's go back to the tour. We have learned that Jephthah's daughter and Samuel may have served in the same generation. Before we talked about Jephthah's daughter, we need to talk about Jephthah. Who was he? What is it that you like the most about this judge who also was from the time of Samson? Feel free to raise your hand and you can use any of the information that I'm displaying on the screen. Who was Jephthah's mom? What was her profession, if you remember? People raise their hand and then they lower it. You can Google it. You can look for it. Sister Henish.
I believe she was a prostitute.
She was a prostitute. So how did people treat it? The sons of a prostitute. It's a rhetorical question. I want you to think about why Jephthah's story is so interesting for personal study. The things that he did as a judge, things that we can imitate. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there is a legacy of united family. Do you recognize these three people at the bottom. Let me increase it a little bit. Do you know who they are? And what do they have in common? Uh, Sister Phillips from New Jersey.
Um, One was the Jephthah's daughter, Samuel, and Samson.
Samson, yeah. They all have in common that Jehovah chose them for a special assignment and that their parents did the right thing in the upbringing. There are many things that we can talk about Jephthah's daughter. We can talk about how she supported her dad vow. The only thing she asked, according to the Bible, is just give me 2 months so I can say goodbye to my friends, the same friends that will visit her every year. The connection to Samuel is that there is chronological evidence that suggests that the young prophet Samuel may have served at the tabernacle at the same time as Jephthah's daughter, potentially receiving encouragement from her. And this will not be new, right? Jehovah always have uh, prophets or any help nearby just when you need it the most. And we can imagine this too serving in Jehovah's tabernacle. Definitely an experience for us to meditate. But let's talk about the vow. What happened? How did it come through? Well, can anybody help me read what took place? Uh, Gloria Ramsey.
A desperate promise in an era of corruption. In the 12th century BCE, Israel is losing its identity. An outcast warlord makes a desperate promise to God for military victory over the Ammonites. The price of that victory will cost his only daughter her freedom, forcing her to redefine sacrifice in the heart of the sacred tabernacle.
Thank you. Thank you, sister. Great reading. So the sacrifice, it was for Jehovah, and Jehovah was the one who selected what was going to get to be given. So there was a conflict, right? There was a threat by the Ammonites, a brutal force oppressing Israel for 18 years, warring against both the people and true worship. The battlefield, Gilead, a rugged, isolated frontier, the home of outcast warriors and desperate elders. The sanctuary, Shiloh, the spiritual epicenter of Israel. Some people call it when heavens touch the earth. What will happen? The difference, the cultural difference between these two groups cannot be more distinct. Jehovah has core values such as love, mercy, and unbreakable faithfulness. But the Canaanites and the Ammonites' weight was completely different. It was material, sex, violence. They worshiped false gods. They had an immoral living, and they even sacrificed humans. On the other hand, you got pure worship, rejecting worldly thinking. So there is definitely a difference between these two. On one side, you have Jephthah and his daughter standing alone as defender of Jehovah's standard. And it is here the illegitimate word law, the outcast, is the one that Jehovah is going to use to free his people. He made this vow that if Jehovah gives him victory, he will give the first person that is on his encounter. And who is she? His beloved only child. It's a reminder of the sacrifice that Jehovah will later make for his entire organization, his entire people, to give his beloved son. And just like Jephthah's daughter, Jesus was in a positive, agreeable mood to do Jehovah's will. So, friends, uh, in the book of Judges, chapter 11, verse 30, we see the, the promise. Whoever comes out will become Jehovah's, and I will offer that one up as a burnt offering. The filter of the law, Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10. Jehovah expressly detests and forbids literal human sacrifices. The law demands giving one's absolute best to Jehovah. But in a legal term, a burnt offering represents a special gift given completely and exclusively to Jehovah. And that's exactly what uh, Jephthah did for Jehovah. So Jephthah destroyed 20 Ammonite cities with a very great slaughter. As he approached town, he see his daughter in triumph watching from his door. She emerges just like any other Israelite, singing and dancing, celebrating his survival. And that's when she realized what her father have done. And her father told her, "Oh no, my daughter, you have broken my heart, for you have become the one I have banished." And what was her reaction? Exactly the same reaction as Mary, as Samuel, as many others in the Bible. Very, very amazing. Friends, during this special week, I'm going to be recording short videos about the life of the family of a carpenter. I want you guys to travel to Galilee, Israel, and to really get, as we're doing our weekly reading, our daily reading, I want you to be in that mood. Let me show you a short video which I prepared for this. So think about these images as we meditate during this week. I'm going to be uploading a new episode, short one, just like the one I did today, to my YouTube channel so that you guys can tag along and also have some food for thought. Okay, so The daughter of Jephthah goes into the mountain for mourning. She has some friends there that are going to visit her every year. It's pretty much like the life of a Bethelite who leaves the comfort of the family home to actually live in Bethel, to live in the house of God. So, in summary, friends, these three Bible characters are definitely united by the area of the judges. Pillar number one, we have the daughter of the judge that made a vow. Where did she end up serving? The tabernacle of Shiloh. The sacrifice was to relinquish having her own family, marrying for a lifelong tabernacle of service. Pillar number two, Samuel. What was the vow? Hannah's vow that if she is pregnant and she has a baby, she's going to deliver him to the temple. What was that location? The temple, the tabernacle at Shiloh as well. Samuel was dedicated as a young boy to serve God for a lifelong tabernacle service, very similar to the daughter of Jephthah. Samson, he had the Nazarite vow. His location was a little different. It was at the frontier of the Philistine, but then again, it was subject to strict lifestyle laws, fighting along as a warrior, and this was also a lifelong assignment. There are the three of them are connected. And especially for Samuel and Hephthah's daughters, they were both pure people in a tabernacle that was corrupted with inappropriate behavior. Something worth mentioning is the annual commendation. Can anybody help me read what true friends do for others? Denise Brown, please.
Yes, thank you. 4 days every year, the young women of Israel traveled to Shiloh to give commendation to this selfless, courageous woman. Centuries later, the Apostle Paul listed Jephthah among the men and women of great faith.
That. Look at that. So, annual commendation. We need to make that a habit to commend others. Going back to Jesus Christ, the geography of the area where he will spend the most time will also help us to understand the culture. In fact, out of the 12 apostles, a large majority was from this area, Capernaum, which will be called Jesus' headquarters. And because the town was surrounded what it was called back then the Galilean Sea, because they didn't have a word for a lake, that's where most of the time Jesus will recruit his disciples, and most of the time where Jesus will return whenever he went. Another thing worth mention is Magdala, where Mary was from. The full name means Tower of Salted Fish. It was a massive fish processing and salting operation that supply preserved protein across the Roman Empire. So fish is what most people, most poor people were able to afford. No wonder in the Bible, especially in the gospel according to John, Jesus is cooking fish after he is resurrected. So look at the three type of fish that probably were around in the time of Jesus. If you didn't know, now you know. Now, when we think about sacrificing or sacrifice, we have to understand that everything was attached to money. For a poor family to have a goat for dinner, they will save the entire year so that they could have a special dinner for the Passover. Not only because that was the way it was done hundreds of years before, where Moses liberated with Jehovah's help the Israelites from Egyptian bondage. That practice continued even to the time of Jesus. So eating lamb in the Last Supper was not negotiate was not to be negotiated. It was without a fault the part that were supposed to take place in that dinner. The wine protocol, it's good for you to know because when you study the Last Supper and you read that they drank wine 7 times during that dinner, you probably uh, may have come to the wrong conclusion that they were probably drunk by the end of the dinner. But now that you know that culturally the wine needed to be diluted, 1 part wine, 2 to 3 parts of water, then it makes sense that in the Last Supper, Jesus and the disciples were not wrong. It also makes sense that Jesus, in his first miracle, he will convert water into wine, since the practice of diluting wine was so common in that area. Another thing that you will find interesting is the stone vessels. I learned through this research that stone vessels cannot be dullified. A strict Jewish ritual requires that you hand wash before you eat, especially from stone vessels, because apparently bacteria does not is not created uh, in this type of devices, vessels. The Pharisees criticized Jesus' disciples for skipping this. It had nothing to do with removing physical dirt. It was more about a ritual purity. Why a stone jar? Water was kept in stone vessels because, unlike porous clay pottery, stone could not become ritually contaminated. This explains the presence of 6 massive stone waters jars at the wedding in Canaan. Everything has an explanation. Last but not least, the geometry of intimacy in the triclinium. So, what was the posture? Diners lay on their left side. This naturally pushed their feet out behind them, which explained how a woman could approach Jesus from behind to anoint his feet while he ate. John leaning on Jesus. This was not a mystical posture, it was pure geometry. If John reclined to Jesus' right, leaning back to whisper a question, naturally placed his head directly against Jesus' chest. And this is why that picture of the Last Supper cannot be accurate. In conclusion, that dinner was something intimate. Everyone was dipping bread in the same jar. They got sweets, they got salty, they have soup, they ate, they celebrated Passover the way that he was handed. So when Jesus dipped the bread and handed it to Judas, he wasn't implying that he was a traitor. He was making a final invitation for him to change his mind. Jesus was extending the highest cultural gesture of honor. One last open door, one last embrace before the betrayal. And he did it anyway. So, friends, as today is Friday, we have less than 7 days. Today, we started doing our daily reading. I hope that the images that we presented today helped you to meditate on these things. As you read some things, now some things will actually make more sense than they did before, and that will help us with our imagination. Well, friends, it has been a pleasure for me to be with you tonight.